A family sent their son to boarding school. They hugged him goodbye at home. They told him to behave well, to study hard, and to do them proud. And they watched him go. He went off to school, he studied hard. He made lots of friends, did loads of co-curriculars, and he had a really great time. His teachers taught him well, and he studied all the core subjects: maths, English, geography, history. But as he grew up, through the school, he wasn't studying towards exams. His teachers weren't teaching him so he could go on and have a high-flying career, because there was a war going on in his country. And every year he spent at school was spent preparing him to be a soldier in battle. Far more important than the content of his lessons were the lessons he was learning about the kind of person he would need to be when he left school. The kind of person who would live a life of selflessness and service. The kind of person who would fight for something they believed was far more important than anyone's individual good. The kind of person who would be willing to sacrifice everything for what is right.
The boy grew into a young man. He reached the end of his school days. His friends hugged him goodbye. They told him to stay safe. They watched him go. And off he went into battle. This war was not how we might think of it in our minds. There were no guns and no explosives, though it was every bit as lethal as if there had been. This was a war of shadows, and the only rule was, never get caught. He was just a teenager, but he knew this was his calling, his mission in life.
Was he scared? Did he ever have any doubts? Did he think about giving up the fight, giving in and joining the side where he knew he would be safe, where he could be rewarded with riches in return for changing sides, where he could live a completely different life? We'll never know what he felt as he went into that battle, but he went into it anyway. He didn't look back. He didn't choose the easy option. One day he was captured, and as punishment he was sentenced to death. His captors told him he could be released if he only admitted he'd been on the wrong side, that what he believed was right was wrong. He refused. He was hanged, his body dragged through the streets and broken.
What was the point of going to school? What was the point of sitting in a classroom counting down the years until he gave his life in battle? It was all for that one moment, the one greatest decision of his life. Back down. Say you're sorry and you didn't mean it. Say you don't really believe what you said you believed. Say you aren't willing to sacrifice everything for it. How do you find the strength of character to stand up for what you believe when everyone around you is saying something different? When no one wants to hear it? When it means you might have to give things up to hold to what is true? At school, he learnt many things, but all of them were teaching him in many different ways, just one thing: what kind of person he wanted to be in this world.
That's the difference between formation and education. That's the difference between Jesuit school and the rest of the world. Because how in the end do you live your life to the fullest? Is that determined by power or money or influence? Or is it a life where you serve the people around you, caring about them more than yourself? When you give without caring what you'll get in return? When you fight for what is right without worrying what damage will be done to you? When you labour tirelessly for the good of this world, and you ask for nothing in return? Nothing except the fulfilment of having lived a good life. Now, Edmund Campion knew the true value of life when he gave it up, rather than giving up what he knew to be right.
Campion gave his life to keep the Catholic faith alive in England at a time when it was outlawed. His battle was to be a priest at a time when it was illegal and the punishment for practicing Catholicism was death. He and others like him eventually won the religious freedom that we still enjoy in this country today. His sacrifice wasn't even a question for him in the end. he knew he was destined for something far greater than personal success. And now his name lives on in the history books and in the pupils and staff of Jesuit schools who remember him almost 500 years after his death.
We don't have religious persecution in our country anymore. Our lives at Stonyhurst are thankfully comfortable and safe. But this injustice rages on in this country and around the world. Poverty, wars, exploitation, discrimination, destruction of our planet, persecution, tyranny. These are the battles of our time. Thank God none of us will ever have to sacrifice our lives for these causes. But what sacrifices are we willing to make to stand up for what is right? To give a voice to the voiceless, to defend the defenceless.
Before he died, Campion put out a message to the whole country saying this: "Don't ever underestimate those who call themselves Jesuit. We number into the many thousands and we aren't like other people. We know we have a great mission to do good in this world. We will never be put off from that mission. We will never stop trying to make the world a better place. And no matter how much the world pushes back at us, however much it doesn't want us to hear hard truths, and it wants us to bury our heads in the sand and be quiet, to look the other way on all these issues and just to get on with our own happiness, we will never back down. As long as there is just one person left in this world who considers themselves Jesuit, we will never be stopped in our cause. Our mission cannot be withstood. We are here preparing to go into the world to be agents for change, and we won't stop until justice across the world is restored. 500 years later, we are still called to take up this great Jesuit mission. Welcome to our Campion retreat. Go! Set the world ablaze!